Hey Brad, I got a good one for you this week. Once again, it didn't take much to find stories that I found completely fascinating, stories that I hadn't heard anywhere else. Some of them I just wanted to spend hours researching and digging into and getting more information about, but I was determined to get all 15 stories, and honestly some of the cabinet departments I struggled a little bit on. But anyways, here we go, the 15 departments. I hope you like the format. We're at the end. There's links to more in-depth information. Still working on that. Give me any comments that you have below that might make this better, or some things that you do like. So anyways, here we go. The Interior Department with Secretary Ken Salazar. Now, the Interior Department manages, one of the departments is the Bureau of Land Management, and the Bureau of Land Management just this week started giving out free Christmas trees. The Agricultural Department with Secretary Tom Vilsack, who was traveling in China, but there was a very interesting program that they released on their YouTube channel, and it was about the USDA in Afghanistan and what they're doing there. The State Department, Secretary Hillary Clinton, there was a report that was issued from a committee that was formed through the State Department with several countries about attacking the problem of pirates off the coast of Somalia. The Transportation Department, where Secretary Ray LaHood tells people, do not use your cell phone to call home. The Treasury Department with Secretary Timothy Geithner, under which the mint falls, and it turns out that there's a new dollar coin, the James Garfield dollar coin, which is kicking Sacagawea out. The Education Department with Secretary Arne Duncan, where we find out that California loses out to Arizona. The Justice Department with Attorney General Eric Holder, where we find out that we're killing it in the homicide rate. The Labor Department with Secretary Hilda Solis, where BP is fined again. The Veterans Department, where the Veterans Department is looking for ideas and help on how to show that an experienced soldier can actually work in the workforce. The Defense Department, where I had a hard time finding some good stories, but stumbled upon a thing that has been around for a while called Marine TV. The Energy Department with Secretary Stephen Chu, where they turn the lights on one of their farms. And the Commerce Department with Secretary John Bryson, where in China they learned to increase exports by importing tourists. The Health and Human Services Department with Kathleen Sebelius, where they find sci-fi is completely unfit. The Homeland Security Department, where we find out 2 months or 1 month into the new fiscal year 2012, we're already full. The HUD Department under Secretary Sean Donovan, where he issues $96 million in sustainable community grants. Some of them actually seem pretty questionable, even though he wishes he had more money. There we have it, the summary of the articles that you can reach by clicking on any of the links. And also there's a bonus video of something I stumbled across while I was doing other things. I had nothing to do with the cabinets, but I found it so fascinating, I thought I maybe would start doing a little bonus feature that didn't have anything to do, as if the 15 cabinets weren't enough. Anyways, I hope you enjoy some of these stories. Click on any of the links to go to them, or you can just watch the video it takes you to from the beginning to end, and we're all going to the depth into these stories. It's a little long for a lot of people and not that interesting for everyone. Anyways, again, provide me comments. I'd like to hear back from you. Thanks. The Interior Department with Secretary Ken Salazar. The Interior Department covers the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, which is about 1/8 of the whole United States, about 250 million acres. But anyways, just this week they announced that you can buy tags for going and retrieving a Christmas tree off of private land, off the BLM land. And usually these tags are very cheap, something like $5, just administrative fees only. And then you could go into the wild, and I think you could get up to 3 per household of any of these trees. Now, here's the deal. Last year, or 2 years ago, we did this, and it is really hard to find what we would consider a classic Christmas tree in the wild. We did it here in Arizona, so I'm wondering if the trees in Oregon might be a little bit better looking. But we went into the wild, found what we thought was the best looking Christmas type tree, bring it home, and first of all, the tree was huge, much bigger than what we had imagined, because in the wild it looks small along all the other trees. We cut it down ourselves, brought it back, and once we brought it into the house, I mean, it looked like one of those Charlie Brown Christmas trees. It was so scraggly and everything, but we loved it. The idea of getting a Christmas tree that was grown on a farm, there's something wrong with that, isn't it? I mean, why not just go buy a plastic one if you're looking for a specific look? Because if it really was about having a tree that you brought in from the wild, and then had something to do with Christmas and a Yule log and all of that, it certainly wouldn't look like any of these farm-grown trees, I don't think. Maybe those trees really do exist somewhere on BLM land. We didn't see any last year when we went. The United States Department of Agriculture, under Tom Vilsack, or the USDA, released a video which was very impressive. It's about 20 minutes long, but I enjoyed the whole thing. I'm surprised I haven't seen this elsewhere. It was obviously put together by the department, so it's not a two-sided look at all the issues, but it was really interesting to see, first of all, to see Afghanistan from a different perspective. So anyways, I guess what is happening is that the USDA asks for volunteers and people who would be interested in going to Afghanistan and actually helping the people there have a more sustainable future through farming, whether it's planting trees or planting crops or anything like that. Some of the little tidbits that you could get out of there, the name of the video is called Path to Progress, and hopefully I'll be able to show you some of the clips from the video here. But some of these people are from, Texas, the USDA workers, and they're trying to help these people understand, how to best, run their crops. They said that, these people really want to be shown, so sometimes they have just a little small setup showing how some of the crops should be raised. I was really impressed, though, by some of the things that they said. For instance, they were asking the Afghan people all the time, how do you feel about your government? How do you feel about the government and how it works for you? Really looking for that insight is, do you really have a government, or are you just a guy in a small village, trying to get by? The other interesting little tidbit that was in it was that one of the soldiers said that, yes, poppy is very popular here. It is the cash crop of Afghanistan, and it's, makes drugs like heroin. But he said, we're not here to eradicate. That's not our job. So there wasn't a conflict of, hey, we're going to destroy your crops and show you how to build other ones. It was more of, hey, we have some expertise here in crop so, maybe we can share that with you. But anyways, check out the video, Path to Progress. Very well done video, and I think gives a different picture of what's going on in Afghanistan, even though you do see the soldiers in the gear and the guns and things like that, but it shows you a little bit more than just, driving around in Humvees and avoiding IEDs. The State Department with Secretary Hillary Clinton, I found something very interesting there. There's a committee, and the full name of the committee is called the Contact Group on Piracy off the Coast of Somalia. So this group is supposed to get together and meet regularly and talk about the issues, not just around, hey, there's pirates, what are we going to do about it, but some of the things that might help them solve this issue. And rightly so, they name that, they need a stable government in Somalia first and foremost to make this happen. But the group met for the 10th time and then just released its report on the issues and what they're seeing there. They are seeing a drop in the number of people being held and then the ships being attacked off the coast of Somalia. So there does seem to be progress. But there's a lot of military interaction that's required to help out with this place, interdiction. One of the things that I hadn't heard of, and again, this is their love of acronyms, it's called the PCASP, or the Privately Contracted Armed Security Personnel. Now, they seem to be a little bit concerned about that these ships are hiring private security personnel to deal with the pirates, although they did admit that not a single ship had been captured that had these private service personnel. Their point is, though, that there ought to be standards about what's allowable. I mean, are these people allowed just to shoot the pirates? What are they allowed to do, actually, off the coast of Somalia? And there aren't any clear guidelines. And, the danger isn't just that they're going to do something crazy like shoot a pirate. But then what if one country comes aboard and says, hey, you shot a pirate, you're now going to jail? There needs to be also a legal framework where everyone can work, what to do with these pirates. For example, there was a video of a NATO, it was actually a Danish ship flying under NATO, that went and chased down some Somalia pirates. Well, now here's the crazy thing. They threw their gear overboard, their ladders and other stuff that they would have used to attack the ship. And you've got to see the boat to realize that this is a really low-key, low-budget operation. But then once they were boarded by the security guards, they gave them food and water directions and sent them off. Well, why weren't they arrested? Why weren't they captured? And when you look at the expense of what's taken to combat these pirates versus what they're spending, it's an asymmetric relationship that we can never win unless we solve the root problem, which is getting a stable government off the coast of Somalia. The Transportation Department under Secretary Ray LaHood is asking drivers not to use their cell phones to call home. Now, this is a simple ruling that was put into place saying that commercial drivers that cross interstate lines, and that's very key, that cross interstate lines cannot use mobile devices except for hand-free devices. Now, what was really impressive about this report, and I read all 66 pages and could have read more because I found it so fascinating, is how thorough they were, and how they really took into account public comment. So there was a public comment period where 300 people submitted comments, mostly in favor or asking for more strict regulations, actually, but it answered all the questions, and sometimes it said, hey, we changed our wording on the regulation based on this or that feedback, or here's why we don't think that that's a valid concern. There were about 5,500 deaths in 2009, the last year we have statistics, that were attributed to distracted driving. Now, distracted driving, of course, is more than just cell phones and being used while driving. And it actually shared a lot of the information, which is conflicting in terms of using a hands-free device. For example, it's not so much the talking on the cell phone that is a problem using the hands-free device, but it's the what it takes to make that call or to answer that call, the reaching for the phone, the dialing the number, or even just turning it on. It's that action that actually causes the biggest problem. But actually talking on a hands-free device is not much different than talking on a regular mobile device. There are a lot of questions. Some of the rules were fascinating. For instance, someone had brought up the Fourth Amendment constitutional issue that says, hey, unreasonable search and seizure, and the committee said, hey, we're making the rule, we're not ruling on how this will be implemented, so that if a police officer demands your cell phone to see if you were calling or using the cell phone while you were driving, that's outside of their their purview. So it answered a lot of these really interesting questions like, well, does this include CBs? Nope. Citizen band radios, even though it does require a hand and a mic, is not covered under this rule. Does it include mobile devices that are mounted, even though they're not a hands-free device? Nope, those are perfectly okay too. So a lot of the rules were, and again, 66 pages of regulation. One of the things that was controversial, but what they did keep in there was that if your company requires or encourages you to use your cell phone while driving, then they're actually liable up to a fine of $11,000 per incident. So anyways, very fascinating rules. It's now illegal to use a non-hands-free mobile device for commercial drivers that travel interstate. The Treasury Department under Secretary Timothy Geithner covers the U.S. Mint, and I found this very fascinating because they announced that they're going to release the James B. Garfield dollar coin, which I had never heard of. Now, it's not that James B. Garfield was somehow significant, but back in 2005, they decided they would start this series of dollar coins presidents, obviously starting with Washington, doing about 4 a year, which is good because they're talking about ending the program now because it's not working out the way they want. And the next president up is my favorite president, Chester A. Arthur. Hope to get one of those dollar coins. But the whole idea was that, with the quarter program where they had different states on the back, were very, very popular. And they have a problem with the Sacagawea dollar and the Susan B. Anthony dollar, which aren't very popular and don't get into circulation. The General Accounting Office said that we could probably save several $billion by not having dollar bills. And if we went to coins, in Europe when we were there, we actually have €1 coins and €5 coins, but we haven't been able to get people onto this using these dollar coins instead of the dollar bills, which is costing us money. But this whole plan of the presidential dollar coin series really hasn't taken off, and people aren't using the dollar coins like the Congress had hoped for, and so now they're talking about wasting money and that we need to end this program that's actually costing us money, which is true because, as long as the dollar bill is an option, people are going to not use the coins as much, and so they've got all these coins now sitting in reserves. A lot of interesting stuff out of the U.S. Mint and what's going on there. You can buy gold directly from them in the form of coins. So anyways, the James B. Garfield dollar coin, looking forward to the Chester A. Arthur dollar coin. I'm going to definitely get me one of those. The Department of Education with Secretary Arne Duncan is announcing the finalists for the Phase 3 of their funding program, Race to the Top. Now, this was a very, very interesting program, and it said, here's the criteria we're going to measure you on, states, and if you want some of this money we've got, then you're going to submit an application showing us how you meet these criteria, and then we'll score it and give people money. So anyways, the Phase 1 people who won, got, I think, $100 million or $250 million. I think even one state got $700 million. Well, Arizona, which came in 41st, which was dead last of all the states that applied. Now remember, here's what is really interesting. These states complained that they're being held to onerous federal rules, but the whole deal is they don't have to apply for this money if they don't want to. And several states haven't applied at all. Texas, Alaska, and North Dakota. They just opted out. Other states applied for round 1, but then didn't apply round 2. Now round 2 is less money. And again, the winners were announced, and they got a little bit of money, $100 million, $200 million, and now it's on to round 3. What's interesting is that the only people who were invited to round 3 were states that were finalists in round 2. California and Arizona are both finalists in round 2, but California choked on their application and were completely disqualified. Some of the things that they asked that these states to do are based on what they believe a good education should run in a state, funding, standardized testing, and things like that. So you may disagree with what they consider racing to the top and providing a good education, but these are real federal dollars that states can apply for and get. And it's, again, completely optional. Most states, most educations within states are raised locally. They don't get federal dollars. This is bonus. No one should complain about it. The Justice Department, with Attorney General Eric Holder, released some statistics out of their Bureau of Justice Statistics, which I didn't even know existed. And anyways, they just released an annual report on homicides. And it turns out that our homicide rate, which is about 4.5 per 100,000, is the lowest it's been in 4 decades. And we're talking almost about heading toward the time of the 50s in terms of homicide rates. I went and read the report, and it's very, very long, and you cannot believe the breakdown of the information. Bottom line, you could skip from here if you want. The homicide rate has just been dropping. It went a little up at the beginning of the 90s, but it's really been dropping ever since the 80s. And the Labor Department with Secretary Hilda Solis was doing their job, making sure that companies were paying their appropriate wages. So BP was fined again. About 300 gas stations in New Jersey were found to be in violation of wage laws. Generally, what happens is that they pay the employees a salary, saying something like, we'll pay you $400 a week, which if you work 40 hours is $10 an hour. But then they work you 50, 60, and 70 hours a week. Trying to get around these wage labor laws. And I think it's great that the government goes out and enforces this. Not just great for the the employee, which I think needs to be protected. Who's going to say, I'm sorry, you're breaking the law, you need to pay me more? You'll get fired. But so it protects the employees, but also protects other businesses. What if BP can have lower prices, which ARCO is part of? What if BP could have lower prices because their wage costs, they figured out how to bring their wage costs down? Well, that's not fair to Shell and other gas stations. Everybody's got to be playing by the same rules in terms of these wage and labor laws. So anyways, good thing BP got fined again for violations in New Jersey, and I think the Labor Department's doing a good job. The Veterans Department with Secretary Eric Shinsinski is asking actually industry and people to come to them with suggestions, and they're going to give I believe it's a very low grant, $25,000, but what they're asking is people is to submit a plan where they can institute an electronic badge or certification that will show employers that a young kid in Afghanistan who ran a town had to deal with water rights and had to deal with military law and people with guns and people who were trying to kill them. This 20-year-old kid comes back to the United States. Well, what does he have to show that he could manage a group of people in a warehouse? So what they're asking is people to give them something that would show the experience that these soldiers, these veterans, really had by awarding these badges. Electronic badges is what they're calling. This could turn the whole education upside down. I mean, people hire server workers like from Cisco Certified because of that Cisco Certified, because it's the shortcut to understanding whether they'll be a good employee or not. And it's so hard to find people with definable skills that sometimes they call it a structural unemployment. The reality is that they could hire people who are willing to do the job and train them, but you know, that's actually risky, and people aren't really usually to take that risk. But if you could, for the veteran's sake, say, hey, look, this guy has a blue badge. Blue badge means he will work good in your warehouse, or he will work good in your office as a leader, as a manager, whatever it is. I think that'd be a great thing. I'd like to see this go way beyond the Veterans Department. But for now, the Veterans Department is asking for the public's ideas and submitting proposals on how they would do it. The Defense Department with Secretary Leon Panetta. I know last week I talked a lot about the F-35, and with the Super Committee failing, the F-35 might get the axe, which, from what I've read, might not be a bad thing. But I took a low-key and looked at what I thought was very interesting. It was called Marine TV. And I'm really impressed, actually, with the production facilities that they have. And they're there to communicate ideas about what's going on to the Marines. They seem to have an audience of Marines, not for the general public. But I think what a great general public outreach, too, that shows that what's going on in the Marines. So Marine TV, check it out. There should be links here. The Energy Department with Secretary Stephen Chu turned the lights on a solar farm in New York, of all places. Now, this is solar farms, and all generation power plants are rated on how many megawatts of energy they could produce. And this solar farm should be able to produce up to 32 megawatts of energy. This isn't the largest solar farm in the world. It's not even the largest solar farm in the United States. The largest one is in Nevada. There are plans for that one to produce something like 500 megawatts. The largest one currently running is actually in Canada. Now, the largest one in plan by First Solar, which is located in Arizona, in Tempe, Arizona, is a solar farm planned for China, which is supposed to do 2,000 megawatts. Now, these are all solar powers, and I don't want to poo-poo someone's, idea that maybe we could improve on solar, and certainly as a, an energy source that's not going to go away. But, when you look at the cost, even if you talk about building a new coal plant, the cost for a solar facility, even at best, is like 3 times more expensive. There seems to be a lot better solutions. The cost on wind actually seems surprisingly low. I think that there are better options, and I think some of the Energy Department's goal is to bring that cost down, but with 3 times the cost for a solar farm producing, I'm not sure that'll ever, even if you cut it in half, where you're going to even get close to how cheap it is. I guess the idea is that there's other benefits that can't be quantified. But some of the statistics are really interesting, and the fact that we're building these large solar farms is very fascinating, and we'll see how they actually perform. The Commerce Department with Secretary John Bryson, along with Secretary Vilsack of the Agriculture Department, and Secretary Kirk, who is actually the head of trade, a non-cabinet level department, went to China and tried to iron out some issues in trade agreements with China. We don't have a free trade agreement, and there are a lot of issues that were talked about in this agreement, typical that you can imagine, things like intellectual property rights and the whatnot. The details are very fascinating in the whole report. Several pages long, and enjoyed reading it. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that we somehow secured permission to advertise in 3 more Chinese provinces, there's 33, that they could come to the United States and spend money. And anyone who comes to the United States, a tourist, and spends money is actually considered export dollars. So that's one of the many things that were announced in this agreement with China. A lot of work to do, I'm sure, on both sides with agriculture, intellectual rights, and things like that. That was one little tidbit I thought was interesting. The FDA, under the Health and Human Services Department, Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, obtained a permanent injunction against the company SciFit, which was a dietary supplementary organization. Now, the interesting thing is it didn't shut it down because it said, hey, your claims aren't true, you're false advertising. What they shut them down for was their inconsistency in manufacturing. And the interesting part also was they reached a level of threshold because they were successful that they actually had to start following rules, correct labeling, consistent ingredients, and things like that. They got a permanent injunction. The Homeland Security Department under Secretary Janet Napolitano, the H-1B1 visa is a program where skilled workers from other countries can come in here to work if they're sponsored by an employer. Well, the cap was set at 95,000, was it 95,000 workers or 65,000 workers, sorry, I don't have the exact number, can come here to the United States. And here we are 2 months into the fiscal year 2012, all those visas have been given out. So there won't be any more coming in for 2012 unless Congress asks for more workers to come in. Today's employment environment, don't see that happening. The Housing and Urban Development Department, under Secretary Sean Donovan, gave out $95 million in grants for sustainable community grants. He lamented the fact that he got a request of over $500 million, but only had $95 million, and I believe next year's budget is completely gutted. They won't be giving out any more. Well, I researched one of the grants, which was given to West Sacramento, and the $400,000 that they were given would be used for planning. $400,000 to create a plan. Now, I know there's some benefits to the program beyond that. It just seemed like, was this really a best? Well, that wraps up our Cabinet Roundup for this week. I hope you come back next week and see what I have to offer. This is the bonus section here. Now, I happen to be watching French news just as a language acquisition tool, and I like to see what's going on in other countries. And on this program, they invited a member of the Republicans abroad and a member of the Democrats abroad to argue about what was going on in Congress and the Super Committee. Didn't know these organizations exist. And if you look at this video, what is very fascinating is they are the exact opposite roles of what you would expect in terms of the Republican versus the Democrat. Now, I can't understand French accents. I asked my brother-in-law, who's French, if it sounded like they had American accents. He thought they didn't have American accents, but he knew they weren't French.
Il faut rappeler que l'apparition des Tea Partiers, c'est une apparition de gens qui disent « nous ne sommes pas des vaches à lait. Ouais. Et nous ne voulons plus payer tant d'impôts, que ce soit les plus riches, les moins riches, les pauvres, la classe moyenne du tout. »
So anyways, here you can see two Americans, or a Republican and a Democrat abroad, arguing on French news program. Thought this was very fascinating. Love seeing these things. Hopefully I'll bring some other international news when I see it.